Welcome to episode 208 of the Company of One podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the issue of what if I fail? The real risk of launching your own outside income, side hustle, whatever you want to talk about. This is a common problem or common issue that we get, and people are afraid to fail. They're afraid to jump out of their day job and try something. So just think about what's the worst thing. What's the worst thing about failing? Is or is it worse to stay stuck? As I see many people in the corporate world are, they stay stuck for 10 something years. 90% of would be entrepreneurs, and this is not my data, 90% of would be entrepreneurs never take the first step. Never. They talk about it a lot. They study it a lot. They may even spend money on things a lot, but they never take the first step because they are afraid of failure. So that's what we're going to talk about today in this episode, and hopefully help you think through whether that's the objection or challenge that you have or not. So let me just tell you, fear is normal. Right? Fear is a normal kind of thing that we struggle through on everything. Fear is anytime you're stepping into something that you are not familiar with, there's naturally fear. We are afraid of because we don't know what to do. We're afraid of messing up. We're afraid of looking stupid. We're afraid of there's all kinds of things. And when I first started a business, I was afraid of doing things wrong. And you know what? I did things wrong. And you know what? It wasn't that bad. But the for all of us that have taken a job, you know that and if you can remember back your first day on a job, and it doesn't matter if it's a volunteer role that you're doing something. A lot of us do volunteer work at the church here in our family. And every time you're doing something new, you're stepping into a group of people who've been doing this before, and you're doing something you haven't done before, and you don't want to look foolish. You're scared, right? I mean, and it's not a fear like I'm going to lose my life, but we don't want to look stupid. We don't want to mess things up. And every time I have ever started a new job, there's a bit of fear or anticipation or whatever you want to call it as you step into that, because you're walking into a zone where other people are living and they know what they're doing and what they're talking about, and suddenly you're there and you don't. So you look like the fool again. So I tell that because that's a lot what it's like to start a business. And we'll call this a business, a side hustle, whatever you're talking about, because a lot of people I'm working with, they have a job, but they're trying to start something on the side because hopefully they want to exit. They want to make an exit eventually, and they want to try to do that. So the question that we hear, or the kind of the comment that I'm hearing that I want to tackle, that I would just want to help you think about, is the fear issue. What if I fail? And what does that really look like? Okay. So let me step first and start with point number one. I've kind of broken this out because we've thought about this a lot, and trying to get some reasonable answers for people. Is failure is not trying, right? Failure, the real true failure is not trying something. Um, I have seen and worked with a lot of people over the years that want to do something and they will talk about it. I've had lunches and meetings, and sometimes with the same people over and over again. One guy comes to mind. We'll call his name John. But he met with me. Um, yeah, he was a student of mine at the university, and he talked about starting a business. He had a good corporate job, all things, but he was bored. I remember him telling me, "I am so bored I can do my job with both arms tied behind my back." Um, and that sounds kind of good until you've done it for the 90th day, right? And you're just bored. You could sleep, you're sleepwalking through work. And that's, guys aren't, we're not wired that way. We need some sort of challenge. We need some sort of thing to push us a little bit more. And so he wanted to start this business, and he talked with me through the program, the graduate program. And then after that, he continued to talk with me, and he would go have lunch with me. And this went on for about 4 or 5 years. And I finally said, John, are you not going to do anything? He says, well, I'm almost there. I've got these plans. And this has now been, you know, 10 or 12 years ago at this point. He's never done anything. He's still miserable at his work. And he hasn't made the first move. He's done a lot of thinking. He's done a lot of planning, but he hasn't made the first move. So, um, and I'm just going to give you some stats. And so I'm just reading these off here as I looked up these stats, because failure is not trying. That's the real failure, is not trying. And so, and you and I probably think about, we're trying something and we're going to fail and we're going to look stupid. But let me read you these stats, because these were interesting. And these are from multiple different agencies like Gallup, Vistaprint, and various places that do these surveys, Bankrate, Lending Tree, Zapier. I don't know where all this survey data comes from, but 62% of Americans say they want to start a business someday. 62%. I've seen higher and lower on that. Well, actually, I've seen higher. I've seen 70 something percent. Uh, yet, now we're fairly certain on this number, only 13% do. So 62% to 13%, that's a big gap. And if you're listening to this podcast, you are very likely in that gap. You're very likely in that gap. Now, I know people listen to this podcast from all over the world, and you're saying, well, my data is different here where we are in Africa and Europe. I get that, but I'm using data from the United States because it's easier to get. But the stats, if I had to guess, are fairly similar. But that means that about 80% of the people who want to start a business never do. They never take the first step in actually starting a business. Now, that doesn't mean they're not planning it, they're not talking about it, they're not researching it, they're not doing things, but they never take the real first step of putting a product out for somebody to purchase. And the number one reason they don't, according to all this research, is fear of failure. Now, there's a couple of other ones that are closely related. Lack of an idea. What's the other one I'm reading here? Uncertainty about what to do next. Not enough time. We'll talk about in the next, I think it's the next episode, not enough time. One of the next two episodes. How do you do this when you don't have enough time? Because let's face it, in the corporate world, especially most of you that are on this audience, I know you are making, plenty of money. You have a good job. I'm talking in general. That's this audience, and that also means you're busy. You probably have family considerations. You have activities that you're involved in. Many of you are involved in your church. Well, I don't have time, so that is an issue. But the number one reason keeps stacking up is fear, and that looks a lot of different ways to people. So so here we are. 80% of the people who want to start a business never take that first step. All right, let me flip this around. Let me give you a little bit more data. How many have done something even small? And I'm going to talk about $500 in income. All right, so if you have a side business that makes $500 in income, side hustle reports, this, I don't know where all this data is coming from again, but it's coming from reliable sources. I mean, I don't know where all their surveys show up, but again, these are from Bankrate and Lending Tree. About 45% of U.S. workers report having had a side hustle at some point. Okay, 45% of U.S. workers have had a side hustle at some point. Now, that means a side business. Some people don't like the word side hustle, but some business on side of their day job. But This figure has struck me ever since I read it some time ago. Only about 30% of those ever earn more than $500 total. Total. Now I'm guessing they're talking about revenue. It could be profit. It doesn't matter at the $500 level, because if you're sitting here and I'm making 100,000 or 120 or 100 $200,000 a year, whatever your salary is, $500 is in the United States is, yeah, it's money, but it's, in terms of income, it's not staggering by any stretch. So these people, 30% of the people who have started a business have never even earned $500 all total. Now that, to me, that's a staggering statistic. In other words, only 14. Just let me kind of put this back into some perspective. Only 14% of working adults in the United States, which is, I forget what the number is, but million, 100 million people, I think it's somewhere in that. Only 14% of working adults have ever earned even $500 outside their paycheck. Okay? That's that means if you earn more than $500 in your side business, you are in the top 14%. Okay? All right, I mean, these numbers, just they catch me by surprise. This podcast is speaking mostly to the massive 48% of professionals out there who are caught in the middle. And again, I understand many of you are in other countries or other parts of the world, and I know I work with a lot of people from India, and they'll tell me, yeah, the stats are similar. I mean, they're different, but the same kind of things go on. There's a lot of people who want to start a business. There's a lot of people struggling with debt, and all the same things are going on in these more industrialized countries. Uh, so right now, if you are listening to this, you probably are looking like, I want out. I want an option. I would like to have some way I could either get out of my day job and do something where I'm in control, or I want to be at least moving in that direction, where I can have many people that I have worked with. They want to grow something on the side so that when they step out of their day job, whether it's retirement or they're just going to leave or whatever happens, that they're stepping into something where they can continue to grow it. They have momentum. But most of them have not crossed this $500 line. And I'm going to call that your confidence line. Confidence. Okay, that's an important thing. That's really what we are talking about. When we are talking about the fear of failure, I just want to reverse the fear of failure and think about, at what point do you start to have confidence? So think about when you went back to your first day on the job that you're doing, or whatever you did, whether it's volunteer or not, doesn't matter. Just think about the first days and the confusion, the I don't know what to do. People weren't really giving you clear instructions, because we never do. And then once you start to get in the rhythm, and if you walk into your job right now, there's just confidence. I know what to do. Even when things mess up a little bit, I know what to do. I know how to handle it. That's confidence. And it's not magical, right? It just comes from success. And somebody gave me this quote one time, that confidence is just memory of past success. That doesn't mean it's staggering, right? Your confidence, your ability to, when you go from a little bitty child to an older child who can walk, your confidence is one step at a time. No staggering feat, one step at a time. So when we cross the $500 line in profit and revenue, we'll just call it revenue right now because it's just easier. When we cross that $500 line, you are going to end up with some different confidence. And I can tell you, we can get you there. We can get you to the $500 line. So if you launch and you only made $500, you now not have a failure. You have data, and that's confidence, that's ownership. So let me just tell you, in that fear, a lot of people do have fears. Hey, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna start some business, and they're going to think, well, what if this fails? What's really weird is a lot of you'll hear people say entrepreneurs fail over and over and over again, and that just sounds. I remember hearing that myself, and I'm like, that sounds gut wrenching. Who wants to do that? But it's not. It's not like that. It's not like you failed and the whole world fell apart. It was like you go and you start doing something and you're like, I'm selling this product A, and nobody really wants it. Or I'm selling a service A, nobody really wants it. Let me go do something B, right? Let me the word we use in the business is pivot. Let me pivot and go do something else. And oh, the something else that made a little bit of money, but that's not still not right. Let me pivot again and do something else, you know, version C. And we see this all the time. We see people that they're changing what they're doing, and they're changing what they're selling, but every time they're getting a little bit of confidence. So we may see people who, I mean, one thing we see a lot of women do is they start selling essential oils, and they'll do, no, that's not going to work. That's where many of them get to, and then they'll be selling candles. Next thing you talk to them, they'll be selling something else, and they're not running around saying, I failed, I failed, I failed. I mean, they did, but what they did is they learn, that's not the right thing. But all the experience they got talking to customers, pricing products, dealing with, hey, customers don't like this, they do like this, all that experience moves into the next thing, right? And so none of these are failures. Even though on paper, right, they're failures. None of these are failures. These are building blocks. And this goes at every single level. I remember being involved in a business that we had investors that had written checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there was multiple of them, and they had I forget what the total is. Doesn't really matter, but when the main guy, the guy that founded the company, when he crashed and burned, as he would say, when the company went under. Um, Actually, we sold the company for assets. It didn't go totally under, but it was a failure on the books, and the so he felt bad about it. So this was a venture capital kind of deal. He felt bad about it, and he went back to the investor, and the investor said, "No, this was a great learning experience. I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in this. Um, Maybe it was a million. I don't remember. I've invested this money in this, and this is what I've learned." And because he learned that, he twisted in his investment strategy, and his next one was a big win. And he actually credited the quote unquote failure as part of what gave him the bigger win. And that's true of everybody. So if we go to the very small scale and somebody's selling essential oils or something, and they move into something else, that's what happens. Is each one of these are building blocks. They're building confidence. So that's what I want to drive into number point two here for just a minute, is you are not building a business. That's not your goal here. Your goal is to start building confidence, right? This is an escape mindset. Escape. I want to be able to escape the traps, the things that are holding me back. We want to blame it on the man. We want to blame it on the corporate world, but it's me and you. We are escaping from our own traps. This is what the company of one mindset is all about. Is you are a business, to own it, to take control of it. So the goal here is not to launch $1 million business. And that's where a lot of people get trapped, is they say, I want to launch a multi-million-dollar business and transform from, this working for, a good salary to, having my own Lear jet parked at the airport. Um, I mean, all that does happen, and that's doable, but that's not how you approach it. And I'll put it into the context of, like, many people have been 100 pounds overweight, right? You get busy in jobs, you stop working out, you start sitting down all day, going to meetings, eating out lunches, and next thing you know, you're overweight, you are out of shape, And very few people at that point in their life are saying, you know what, I'm going to enter a weightlifting competition, or I'm going to go run a marathon. That's not usually where your mindset is. Usually your mindset is, I just am trying to survive. I need to lose 10 pounds. I need to start. Right. And a lot of times you'll see people at the gym and they'll be overweight and they'll have this goal. I'm trying to lose 20, 30, 50 pounds, some 100. But the goal is not to go out there and win a competition. The goal is, if I could lose this weight, I'm a winner. And they start feeling like a winner pretty early on because they start seeing the numbers move, right? You start measuring your numbers, whether it's your weight or your strength or the amount of time you can run, whatever it is. And sometimes there's very small wins. You know, people start measuring weight loss sometimes ounces at a time when they start, and then they get to where they're measuring pounds, and then they're getting where it's 10 pounds I lost. Uh, and sometimes during that process, they may say, you know what? I want to run a marathon, or I want to enter this competition, but it doesn't happen on day one. Because if you start on day one with that mentality, it's overwhelming. It's just your mind just can't get around it. So what you are trying to build, don't worry about building a business. Worry about building confidence. Worry about the lessons that you are learning. Worry about $1 at a time, one customer at a time. So that's what you want to think about is the failure. Point one again, the failure is not starting, not trying. And number two is you're not trying to build a business, you're trying to build your confidence. So one more thing to throw at on this. How do you minimize the risk? How do you minimize the risk on the first attempt? Now, what are you risking? And a lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, I'm scared. I'm not risking. And well, actually, a lot of times they don't admit that until I ask them. But eventually they'll say things like, where there's a lot of risk here. I'm like, what are you risking? So usually the first one starts out in money. It costs a lot of money to spend it to start a business. That's not true. A lot of people spend a lot of money to start a business, but it doesn't cost a lot to spend to start a business. You want to launch small. Dave Ramsey, I have heard him on the radio where people are talking about launching a lawn care business or a landscaping business or something, and they were telling him, we got to go out and buy all this equipment, we're going to be $80,000 in debt. And he was like, that's stupid. He said, nobody does that. You go and you get a job and you need some equipment, and you go rent the equipment, and you build that into the cost of the job, and you go do the job, and you're left with money in your hand, and you've spent nothing because all the rental was paid for by the job. And that's launching small. You don't need all this stuff. What you need is your existing skills, your existing connections. And what we do, and when I'm coaching people, we go through a reverse interview exercise and just building the intentional connections that you need to get the business going. So this is just not. Let me remind you. Let me give you. Just go back here. If you can hit $500, I hope this isn't demotivating. I hope it's motivating. But if you can earn $500, and you can, I promise you, you can. I don't care what business you're in. I don't care if you're selling essential oils or if you're selling some kind of the craziest thing, no demand. You can get to $500. And it doesn't matter that you don't know how to sell, you can't stand selling, none of that matters. You can get to $500. And when you do, actually, when you start making some money, your confidence grows. But if you hit $500, you're in the top 14%. Top 14%. So now think about this, because where most of us are right now we are in a day job, and your paycheck is your ceiling, right? And what you are waiting on is somebody to walk in and say, you got a raise, or we're promoting you. You're waiting on somebody else to make the decision, and it's all a ceiling. Don't let it be. Your paycheck, granted, your employer is going to have some parameters about what they pay you, but there's no limit about what you earn. So, all right, before we jump off of here, I'm in this fall, I am personally taking on 5 professionals, 5 people. I'm only going to do 5 to escape, and we're doing an escape. This is a beta run of the Escape and Earn Accelerator program. What we're doing is a hands-on, invitation-only coaching experience where I'm going to go step by step. Now, get this, towards your first $2,000 of income in 90 days. Now, let me put that in perspective of the stats I'm sharing. If you hit the $2,000 mark, you are in the top 5% of the people in the United States. That's $2,000 puts you in the top 5%. So if you want to be considered for this, send me a direct message, say fall escape in it, and I will be glad to get you the details. So again, this is, if you are letting fear control you, if you're running on fear, then we can get you past that. And what you're learning and what you're looking for is some small wins to build your confidence. All right, be back here with you next week. Thank you for your time.